All right, so we met this morning and reviewed a number of exhibits. It's my understanding that there is a stipulation to admit a number of additional exhibits. Is that accurate?
That's correct, Your Honor.
That's correct.
Okay, do you want to go ahead and put that on the record?
Yes, Your Honor. We would stipulate to exhibits 60 through 73, 90 through 124, 127, through 143, 144, this court ruled was admissible, and Ms. Chartier can put her objection on the record on that. 146 through 165. 166, the court is still reviewing. 167 through 188, 224 and 225. And then 226 would be demonstrative evidence, but we won't be admitting it in the trial. I mean, we will be displaying it during the trial, but not for admission.
Right.
Is it, I think it's 261.
261. Oh,
Okay, 261 is the demonstrative exhibit.
correct. And if I said 226, I meant 261. So if you could strike 226, we haven't addressed that one yet.
Okay. All right, is that accurate, Ms. Chartier?
That's correct, Your Honor. On 144, the summary of the objection was that it was irrelevant to the matter. Thank you.
All right, and so that was an autopsy photograph depicting a ring that was being worn by Ms. Warner, and the court's ruling was that that was relevant to some of the issues in this case, particularly issues that have arisen with respect to the jewelry that Ms. Warner regularly wears and whether or not she may be a target for theft or something like that. So I do think it's relevant, and I did admit that over the objection. All right, was there anything else we needed to address on the record at this point?
Not at this point, Your Honor. I do expect maybe we could do two witnesses, take a break, and then there's the issue with Maddie Wolf's testimony. But I could hold off on that until the break.
Okay, all right, that is fine with me then.
There are some witnesses we've stipulated to not calling. I don't know if the court wants to hear that now or later, whatever the preference is.
You can go ahead with that now, we may as well.
Okay.
Get it out of the way.
Dalton Breckel, Tom Craig, Maddie Defer, Lawrence Lee, Anthony Knecht, Suzanne Wilhelm, Michael Sweeney, Deputy Bowden, and Deputy Frost.
Is that agreed with people?
That's correct, Your Honor. We agree.
Okay, and then the other thing was that we did receive a question from the jurors. I have reviewed that with counsel. It is relative to testimony with respect to the GPS tracker, and it's my understanding that counsel is in agreement that that question should not be asked.
That's correct.
That's correct.
Okay.
And I guess one question that I had as it relates to the stipulated exhibits, is the court admitting them as we go or at the end once they're stipulated to? I just want to make sure.
Thank you for
I'm clear on
bringing
that.
that up once again too. So all of those exhibits that have been stipulated to up until this point will be admitted then, and I think we agreed to have kind of a standing order that unless it's expressly stated otherwise, that if the parties are stipulating to entry of an exhibit, that it will be admitted into evidence.
Thank you, Your Honor.
That's correct. Thank you.
Okay. All right, anything else then before we bring the jury back?
No, Your Honor.
No, thank you.
Okay.
Oh.
No, it's just silent.
Oh, did you check your stuff to make sure?
It's
You may be seated.
All right, you people may call your next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. People call George Ziegler.
If you will raise your hand, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under penalty for perjury?
I do.
Okay, you can sit down.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
Could you tell us your name and spell it for the record?
My name's Georgia Ziegler, Georgiaziegler.
And where do you work?
I work for the Michigan State Police.
And what do you do there?
I am a cell phone records specialist.
And what does that mean?
I specialize in analyzing historical cell phone records for criminal investigations.
And where do you get those records?
These records are obtained from the cell phone service provider, so in this case it would be Verizon.
Okay. And how long have you been doing that?
I've been analyzing records for approximately 5 years.
And do you have training in this area?
I do.
And what kind of training?
I've gone through over 300 hours of training specific to analyzing historical phone records. A lot of that training is conducted by software vendors or other industry professionals who handle the material.
And you mentioned software. Do you use software in your analysis?
I do.
What kind of software?
In this case, I use CellHawk as well as PenLink's PLX.
Okay. And are you aware of like the industry standard in this area? Would those be considered industry standard, those two programs?
Yes, CellHawk is a very common program for law enforcement or attorneys.
And what does the software actually do? How do you
The-
use it?
I use the software to help efficiently process the records because when we receive cell phone records, they have hundreds of rows of data, so it helps process it more efficiently. However, everything that I do in the software can be done by hand. It just makes it more efficient for our time.
Do you then spot check to make sure that the software is rendering accurate results?
That's correct.
And how do you do that?
To spot check the records, I look for the key tower transactions or the key transactions in the report and recreate those transactions on a map by hand and make sure that our software is displaying those transactions appropriately.
So the software is basically mapping the location of something on an actual map, is that correct?
That's correct.
And, all right, and then you are actually going and looking at the data and say, is that correct? Is that where it really is on the map?
That's correct.
Okay. And then does someone check your work once you've used the software, done your own spot checking, and now you have a report?
Yes, my report undergoes multiple layers of peer review where another analyst who's trained in this will recreate the report or the records and the analysis.
Okay. And about how many cases have you worked on doing the same kind of analysis?
I would say around 100.
Okay. How did you get involved in this case?
At the time, I was in a training for software, and some of the material that they were training on had me use case materials, so I inquired to look at the records for this case to see if I could identify anything that may have been missed.
Okay. So you were provided the actual Verizon records that are at issue here?
Yes, I was.
Okay. And what did those consist? Well, let me ask you this: were they particular to Dee Warner's phone? Any of those records?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And just referring to those records for the time being, did you do the analysis?
I did.
Okay. And so, what did you do to prepare for court today?
I completed an analysis, and I put my analysis on a presentation for today.
Okay. And showing you what's been admitted just for demonstration purposes only, this won't be in evidence, but so the jury can follow along better, is People's 261. Is this the presentation that you referred to?
That's correct.
Okay. Obviously, you don't need to read the slide, but can you tell us a little bit about the methodology that you haven't already mentioned?
So this slide just talks about the types of records that we receive to analyze. Cell phone providers maintain records of all their customers' usage on their network. So in this case, Verizon maintains a log of all of the activity for this phone number. That could be texts, calls, anytime the user would have accessed the internet. That could be in the form of checking their email, browsing the web, any applications that require internet. And Verizon will log these transactions on their network, and included in those logs are going to be the date and time that it was initiated, the type of transaction it was, if there was another number involved in that transaction, so if it was a voice call, and sometimes there'll be duration or a location component, which is in the form of a cell phone tower or a cell site. The other records that we can receive from the carrier are network performance records. These are records that generate on the back end. The user does not have to be manipulating their phone for these records to produce. And these records essentially indicate interactions between the device and the cell phone towers in the area. And those cell phone towers in the area can infer an approximate distance from the cell site that the device is expected to be.
So you mentioned a couple things. You mentioned texts and voice calls. So those would be things, for example, a text. If the phone that you're analyzing, those records, had sent a text, that would be something that the user would generate intentionally, correct?
Yes.
Do these records also include things that the phone would do on autopilot, that it would do automatically?
Yes.
Like, what kinds of things would those might be?
Some of the records that may be generated on their own would be if you received an incoming text or a call. Obviously, the user doesn't have control over who's calling them. There would be some data sessions potentially that are generating. If there's data being run in the background, like a background application. And then the network performance records, those are all generated by Verizon. The user doesn't have to be manipulating the phone.
So if I'm on my phone and I have like a weather app that I want it to be always having the current weather, I don't have to do anything to say, hey, go get the weather for me. It automatically appears on my phone, right?
Yes.
Okay, and that would be one of the things you're referring to that happens in the background without the user being involved?
Yes, that could be.
Okay, thank you. All right, can you explain a little bit about, I mean, for those who don't know the specifics about the cell towers?
So, like I said, these records contain locational information in the records. They're not exact locations of the device. However, they do provide the location of the cell phone tower. So, if I were to pull out my phone and make a call, Verizon has to provide service to my phone so that it can make that call. Those tower locations are cell sites, and those are essentially structures that have antenna equipment to direct radio frequency signals to a designated area so that your phone can receive signal. These cell phone towers are broken up into sides or sectors. So in the records, not only are we getting the location of the tower, but also what side of the tower is being accessed by the device.
Okay. And is this an example of that?
This is a visual example of what that's going to look like in my report. So the picture on the left is an example of what a single access or a access on a single side of the tower is going to look like. That pie shape, or what we would refer to as a sector, is indicating that the signal is oriented towards the west and the device is using the west side of that tower. The picture on the right is what it looks like if there's multiple sides of the towers being accessed. And one thing to note here is that the sector lines and the shading there do not represent the boundaries of coverage. Those are just visual guides so you can understand what side of the tower is being used.
Okay, just so everybody understands, in the picture on the left, where is the tower? Is
The
it-
tower's gonna be at the point of, that sector. There's a very small orange circle. I don't know if you can see it or not.
Are we talking about right here?
Yes.
All right, and what do you have here?
This is a visual example of what the network performance records will look like. So as I mentioned before, you'll get the side of the tower that's being accessed by the device, but there's also inferred distances from the tower that the network can provide. Those distances are going to be represented as a curved line along that side of the tower, or an arc, as indicated by the number 2.
So how does the tower know what the distance is between the tower and the phone?
The network will your device will constantly be communicating with towers on the network so that it knows if you need to make a call, it knows what tower is going to have the best quality of service, so that call can be made. And those signals will constantly be interacting between the tower and the device, and when the signal is traveling at the speed of light, you can infer a distance of how far the phone away is based on how long it takes for the signal to go back and forth.
So there's a signal that goes out from the cell side of the cell tower to the phone and back,
Correct.
and it knows how long that would take depending on how far it is away.
Correct.
Okay. Is there a maximum distance that would work? Is it 2 miles, 100 miles, and somewhere in between? Do you know?
I do not.
Okay. Why is that? Why don't you know?
Depending on the towers or the geographic area, the tower density in rural areas, there's going to be a lot less towers because there's a lot less demand for service. Whereas in an inner city, you're going to have a lot more towers in the area. So those towers are going to be oriented in a way that provides continuous coverage to the area. So in a rural area, the towers may cover a lot more space, geographic space, than it would in a urban area.
All right, so you did an analysis of a certain set of records, correct?
Correct.
And what were those records?
I analyzed records associated to Dee Warner's Verizon phone.
And what was the date that you looked from when to when?
The entire record set covered March 28th, 2021 through April 28th, 2021, and my analysis focused around the time of her disappearance.
Okay. All right, and this is just to help the jury understand the symbols that we're going to show in a minute?
Yes, so the symbols there in purple, those represent the sides of the tower that are going to be accessed by the device. If there is a distance associated with that access, it'll be represented by a curved line along that side of the tower at that designated distance. The blue marker pin represents 2170 West Munger Road, or the property. And the small orange circles will be the Verizon cell sites.
Okay, and are these the actual cell site locations?
Yes, so this is Verizon's towers in the area. The zoomed in image there is the surrounding towers in the immediate area of the residence.
So if we look at the bigger scale map that's kind of to the lower right-hand corner, and you look at Metro Detroit, for example, there's parts of it that are just all orange. You can't even see a distinct circle. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and is that an example of when you said there are more towers in urban areas?
That's correct.
Okay. And then the call out there is just the area around the Munger property, is that right?
That's right.
Okay. And can you look and tell us where are the closest towers to the Munger residence?
The closest towers are going to be, by bird's eye view, is going to be directly north of the residence and south with a little bit to the east.
Okay, and I'm going to just point at one here. Is that one of the ones you're referring to?
That's correct.
Okay, that's the one to the north. And what about this one?
Yes.
Okay. So again, these are, this is the phone number, correct?
That's correct.
And then the range of dates that you looked at.
That's correct.
Okay. Is this an example of what the data looks like when you looked at it?
That is correct.
Okay, can you explain it?
So this is an excerpt of the internet usage report. This is the last activity on this device on the internet side of the records. They're color-coded based on session ID. So if you're looking at the first column there, it indicates charging ID. That's a unique Verizon number specifying the session ID or the data session. So every time that's reoccurring, that just indicates that that session renewed and is continuing on and on.
So does that mean that every time the phone connects again, there's a new number for that? For that charging ID?
Yes, if there's a new internet session initiated, it will be a unique identifier under the charging ID.
Okay. All right. And then go on, please.
And the start date and time is indicating the origin of that session, when it was originating, and then if there's a reoccurring charging ID or session ID, that's the start and date time is going to be when that renewed. The stop date and time is when one session ends, and if it's a reoccurring session, it'll renew at the exact second that the next or the last one expired.
And if that happens, does that mean that there was no, that connection was never lost? If it's a renewing session?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
The record close cause is going to tell us the reason why the record closed out. So you can see there's quite a few there that list time limit. That just indicates that those sessions ran for the maximum amount of time before Verizon needed to re-authenticate that data session and renew. The MSISDN just indicates this record set belongs to that phone number. The megabits is going to be how much data transpired for these sessions. And the ECGI eNote ID, that is just a tower identifier.
Okay. And is this the same data, just in a different order?
Yes, so this is the same information essentially broken up by session ID. So with the green and the yellow, you can see that those both originated the day before, so April 24th. And they continued on for several renewals or sub-sessions until they timed out. The orange and the blue and the pink rows at the bottom are all sessions that were single session data access. The bottom row in the highlighted in the pink is the last initiated session by this phone, and that occurred on April 25th at 7:01 in the morning.
Okay. And it says that the start time was 7:01, the stop time was 7:05. What do those figures tell us?
Because this record close cause indicates it was a normal release, that session lasted approximately 4 to 5 minutes, and it closed out under normal circumstances.
And do you know from this information whether that was a user-generated connection or whether that was a background connection like we talked about earlier?
I have no way to distinguish that.
Okay. All right, but the bottom line here, the last time the phone was active on the network was 7:05.
For this specific record set, yes.
Okay. All right, so what do we have here?
This is essentially the records displayed geographically. So as I had mentioned, there were some network performance records that were generated indicating some of the last activity on this device. You can see that there was access on 2 towers, the tower north of the residence and the tower south of the residence. And the timestamps with the asterisk, I don't know if you can see that far, but those are timestamps that have an associated distance measurement, where those distance measurements are displayed along that side of the tower.
Okay. And so, you have the north tower that we mentioned and the south tower that we mentioned.
Yes.
And then there are, two sets of arcs. Can you explain those?
So what we have here is what I would call competing towers. So the device is constantly analyzing the network to understand the quality of the signal strength so that if a call were to be initiated, it would know which of these two towers is going to provide the best quality of service. And these towers have multiple registrations or interactions with the device, and those interactions have distance measurements away from those towers.
And so, the arcs represent the distance that the records are saying the phone was away from the towers.
Correct.
Okay. And why do we have an arc rather than a point?
The arcs are, if the tower is measuring the phone to be 3 miles away from the tower, and we know what side of the tower is being accessed, then we would draw a line along that side of the tower for 3 miles out, and that's why you get a partial circle.
Okay, so if we just had, for example, the north tower, then the bottom arc, we wouldn't have at all.
That's correct.
Okay, and vice versa.
Yes,
Okay, so is there an advantage then to having connections to both towers?
there is. So because we have two towers communicating with the phone in close proximity in time, where those two distance measurements are intersecting is a good indication where that device is expected to be.
Okay, and where is that blue pin located?
The blue pin represents the Munger Farm property.
Okay, is this a close-up of that?
This is a close-up satellite view of where those arcs are intersecting.
And so why is there a difference of however many feet that may be between the, you've got, going from the bottom left to the top right, you've got 4 pieces of arcs, and you've got 2 coming the other way. Why aren't those like right on top of each other?
It's normal for devices to generate a slight variation in the distances because essentially the network's measuring the time it takes for the signal to travel. Sometimes the signal might be delayed. If it's not direct line of sight, then that signal might have to take a different path to get to the phone.
Okay, but we don't have any other arcs, do we, other than these that are displayed?
Correct.
Okay. And so does this represent movement of the phone or no?
In this instance, it would be hard to distinguish movement.
All right, so again, all of these are intersecting right where the Munger Farm is.
That's correct.
Okay. And that's what the towers are telling you, this is where the phone is.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, there are some other times on here. We said that the last time that there was a data session was 7:01. What do the other times represent?
The times indicated here are the tower registrations or the interaction times with the device and these towers.
And so is that when you said that the tower needs to know if a phone is within reach of that tower? So if a call comes in, it knows that the phone is there?
That's correct.
Okay. And when is the last one of those? Is it represented here?
The last interaction would be at 7:14 and 21 seconds.
Okay, and that's AM
AM.
on Sunday morning.
Yes.
Okay. So did you also look at the record of her actual voice calls?
I did.
And is that what this represents?
Yes.
Okay, and tell us about this.
So this is an excerpt from the voice activity on the network. The top row there, I know it's kind of hard to see, but the top row is going to be the last outgoing and connected call for this device on the Verizon network. That occurs on April 24th in the evening at approximately 4:47 p.m. And then the subsequent calls are all the incoming calls the next morning that are ringing to voicemail.
So that phone made an outgoing call on Saturday at 4:47, And then after that, every single call was an incoming call.
That's correct.
All right, and you have the duration of those calls?
Yes.
Okay. So in the second to last column, the first incoming call, it says 000003. What does that tell us?
That was a incoming call, and after 3 seconds, it hit the voicemail.
Okay. And then just scrolling down, similar, either 2, 3, 4, or 5 seconds for all these incoming calls.
Yes.
Okay. And then at the bottom, you indicate calls handled by voicemail.
Yes.
And what does that indicate?
The bottom section there is a grid of every day that there was a call that was handled by voicemail. So these would be all the unanswered calls that ring to voicemail.
Okay, and just so the jury can be clear, can you read the numbers starting from March 30th?
Yes, so one thing I would like to note here is that there are gonna be days in here that should indicate 0. So if we're looking at April 1st, there's no column for April 1st, that's because there was 0 calls that rang to voicemail. So I can read March 30th is 20, March 31st is 1, or excuse me, 2, March 31st is 1, April 2nd is 1, April 5th is 2, April 9th is 1, April 10th is 2, April 12th is 1, April 14th is 1, excuse me, April 14th is 2, April 15th, 1, 16th, 2, 19th, 1, 20th is 2, 21st is 1, 22nd is 1, 23rd is 2, 24th is 1, 25th is 75, 26th is 43, 27th, 33, and 28th, 16.
Okay, and so there's a pattern here.
Yes,
So so you're saying that from the 30th of March through the 24th of April, the most times that that phone had a call go through to voicemail was 2 in one day.
correct.
And then on Sunday, the 25th, how many went through to voicemail?
75.
Okay, and did the record say that she ever answered her phone after Saturday, the 24th?
No,
Did she ever make a call after Saturday, the 24th?
no.
All right, thank you.
Good afternoon. Is it Ms. Ziegler?
Yes.
Okay, I wanted to make sure I was pronouncing it properly. My name is Mary Chartier. I have some questions for you this afternoon. So on your report, which Ms. Saylor is getting ready for us, do you have a copy in front of you?
I do not.
Okay, so in case we need it, Ms. Saylor will be able to pull it up. It says last updated with the demonstrative aid that you have for us on February 12th, 2026. That would be Thursday, correct?
Correct.
What did you update on it?
I made some adjustments to the slides. I know there was some grammatical errors on the case detail slide. The display of the title on the map slides needed to be adjusted because the white box behind the text wasn't representative, or it was not covering the full text, so you couldn't see the full text.
Was there anything substantive? It sounds like those things are either typos or aesthetics or grammar. Anything substantive that you changed?
I don't believe so.
You also indicated that when you are spot checking the software, you recreate key transactions, correct?
Correct.
How long does it take you to recreate key transactions?
It can depend on if there's some issues, like some troubleshooting stuff, but I would say in this case, maybe an hour.
Were there any issues with the software that you needed to troubleshoot?
No.
You had indicated that you got involved in the case to see if anything had been missed. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Was anything missed?
No, anything that I thought that I found as far as an investigative lead would have been relayed to the officer in charge.
So maybe I did not phrase my question properly. You got involved to see if anything had been missed before your involvement? That's how I understood your response earlier.
I was looking for, at the time, there was no body recovered, so I was essentially looking for records that might help lead to a location.
Were you looking to see if another analyst had missed something before you, or no? You were just coming in to assist in an investigative lead?
Yes, I was.
The latter? You were coming in to assist,
Yes.
not to see if somebody else had missed something?
Well, when I do my own analysis, it would be an independent analysis, so if my analysis differed from somebody else's, that would be apparent.
Did your analysis differ from someone else's?
It, as far as what?
In far as anything?
No, I don't think I generated anything new.
You also indicated that people sort of spot check your work or check it, correct?
Yes.
Who did that?
This most recent report was peer-reviewed by Parker DeGroot and Elizabeth Wandry.
And when you're saying report, you mean what had been up on the screen?
Yes.
What about your work analyzing the records? Did someone check that?
What do you mean?
Sure. So you put cell tower locations, things like that. Did someone check that work, or were they just looking at your report?
Yes, so when we submit our stuff for a peer review, they'll pull up the case files in our software and regenerate those results.
When you say peer review, this is someone who works with you, correct?
Correct.
Now, Ms. Saylor, would you pull up the report, please, and go to what would be the third page? Is this cell tower one of the cell towers that you're talking about in terms of cell sites in this case, or is this just a random photograph?
This is just an example of what a traditional cell site would look like.
Thank you. And then would you go to page 6, please? So if we look on the 4th bullet down, it says the activity displayed is meant to provide an overview of the approximate geographic location. Talk to me about the approximate geographic location. When you show a little button up there that says this is where the device is, how accurate is that? How close to that location is that?
I don't indicate where the device is, I indicate where the towers are that are being accessed by the device. And the device would have to be in the area where the signal could reach for those towers to be accessed.
So when you showed in your report the device being, for instance, on the Munger property, so if you could go to slide 13, please. So we see that little blue dot. Are you saying that's where the device was?
The blue marker pin is just a pin on the map for the property.
Okay, so terrific. That's what I wanted to make sure I understood from your testimony. So that's the Munger property. That's not where the device is located.
That's correct.
You can't, and again, unless things dramatically changed and I'm not keeping up with it, you can't tell us where the device last was connected, like in terms of an actual location.
I would never be able to give you an exact location of where the device is, but when you have instances where there's multiple towers giving distance readings, it's a pretty good indication of where the device is relatively.
Pretty good indication. So how close? So, for instance, on the Munger property, on a neighbor's property, on the road, how precise are you getting?
These arcs are pretty accurate. I believe the industry understanding is within 1/10 of a mile.
Within 1/10 of a mile?
Yes.
And is that why, though, you put the estimated distance from the tower? Because you can't give us an exact location.
Correct.
Now, also on that same slide, you said it's hard to distinguish movement. So you can't tell us, for instance, a phone is going from one location to another.
In this case, no.
Correct. Yeah, and that's, I'm only interested in this case. Thank you. There might be others. Now, also, you said there's a slight variation in distances, and again, that's why you have to estimate, correct?
Correct.
If you would go, Ms. Saylor, to the next page, page 12, or actually the page before page 12. Thank you. So these times, 7:13, 16, 7:13, 33, those are times that the device is connecting with the towers. Is that accurate?
Yes, those are times that the device is interacting with that specific tower.
And so if I look at the bottom, 7:13:11, 7:13:12, so that's 7:13 a.m. in the morning. And then just not even a second later, it's connecting to the north tower, correct? At 7:13:16, is that what that shows?
Yes.
So why is that? When you talked about cell phone tower strength, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, is it essentially your phone? So I have my phone on me right now. It is just constantly looking for the strongest tower. Is that accurate?
The best quality of service, so it's rating the signal strength and quality.
So I'm not doing anything with my phone right now. You can see that. So, but it's checking in to see what's the best signal, and it's that there's that variation, right? Within a second, it's going from different towers.
These are the interactions between those two towers. We don't get the rating between, like, what the device decides is the best between those two unless a call's initiated.
But the device is resonating or reacting to those towers. Is that accurate?
The device is interacting with both towers.
Okay. So almost, in some cases, simultaneously.
Yes.
Thank you. What are things that affect cell tower signal strength?
Obstructions. So if you're in a concrete building, your signal strength's going to be hindered. Distance away from the tower could lessen the signal strength. If you're not straight out in front of the antenna, the strength's going to be weaker.
So lots of things can factor into it.
Yes.
Can weather?
I don't know of an instance where weather had an effect on my quality of service.
What about the number of people who might be on their device? So for example, if a lot of people are using the north tower, might it bump me to the south tower?
It could.
Now you had indicated that we go to page 10, please. The bottom row. This is the last connected data usage for Ms. Warner's device at 7:01:18, correct?
That's correct.
And then the stop time is 7:05:45, right?
Correct.
But you don't know what was going on. You don't know what was happening with the device to register that. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Now, if we look up 2 rows before that, so the 1 row right up in green, that start time is 1:47:20 and the end time is 7:47:20. Do you know what's going on with that it essentially would be 6 hours?
6 hours is Verizon's maximum amount of time that a session can stay open before needing to re-authenticate with the phone.
So you can have kind of two things going on at the same time. This one session that ends on 7:47 and then another activity that begins at 7:01. Is that accurate?
Yes, you can have multiple data sessions running at the same time.
And then you said the final column, the one on the right-hand side, the 22601 and 22609, those are actually the symbols for different, or the numerical symbols for the two different towers that you were referring to.
Yes, the last column is a tower identifier on Verizon's internal side.
Now, you did not analyze Ms. Warner's actual phone, correct?
Correct.
You analyzed the records from Verizon?
Correct.
And I think we already covered this, but the estimates that you showed where the arcs were on your report, you can get us somewhat close, but you cannot pinpoint that location, correct?
Correct.
I have no additional questions. Thank you.
Ms. Saylor, would you mind? Yeah, that would be great. 10. I just want to quickly do two things. First, the green line second to the bottom, the one that timed out after 6 hours.
Yes.
Okay. So if I'm understanding you correctly, the the network remains open to that phone for 6 hours, and if nothing happens, it just times out.
Correct.
Okay. Does that mean that the network has connected to the phone during that time?
What do you mean?
Was the phone connected at 7:47, or was the network just open to the phone if it appeared?
So the last time that that session re-authenticated with the phone would have been at 1:47 in the morning, and that session stayed open regardless of if the phone was using that session or not.
Okay. So we know that at 1:47 there was a connection, but after that we don't know.
For that session, correct.
For that session, exactly. Thank you. And then if you could go to 13. So I know you said that all these lines are estimated lines, but I just want to go over how many there are. So on the left-hand side of the page, you've got 713, 33, 714, 05, and so there's 4 times there, correct?
Correct.
So you've got one line associated with the first 3, is that correct?
Yes.
There's one, okay. So am I correct that there's actually 3 arcs there, 3 estimated arcs, but they're all one on top of the other?
Correct.
Okay. So in other words, the phone, the tower is estimated 3 times that's where the phone was along that arc.
Correct.
Okay. 713, 16, that's just the one time that the phone estimated, or that the North Tower estimated that the phone was just a few feet south.
I know you're summarizing testimony, but it's really leading into leading. Objection.
I understand. I'll do it differently, Your Honor. The 713, 16 line, could you explain why that is different from the 3 lines that are all together right above it?
At 7:13 and 16 seconds, the signal would have had a slight variation in the timing that it reached the phone.
Okay, and then the same for, you've got on the other side, you've got 708, 704, and 706. Those are just single readings,
Correct.
and each one of those generated an arc coming off the south tower.
That's correct.
Okay, and then 705, 707, 708, 713, 11, 713, 12. There are how many different arcs associated with those timestamps?
That one arc is associated with all those timestamps.
Okay, so 5 times the south tower estimated that that's where the phone was?
That's correct.
Okay. And where these come together is it a good indication of where the phone is physically located?
Correct.
All right, thank you. Nothing further.
the phone, to be clear, could be anywhere on the arc, correct?
Which arc?
So if we look at 70830, that phone could be anywhere on that arc, correct? That's why you have the line there?
Correct.
And while Mr. McCready asked you about lines coming together, your testimony when I talked to you was it would be an estimate, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. No additional questions.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
All right, can council approach? I have some questions from the jurors. We have 3 questions from jurors. It's my understanding that the attorneys are in agreement that they all may be asked.
That's correct, Your Honor.
Yes,
Thank
Your
you.
Okay. So the first question is, in what ways would a cell phone lose all contact with a cell phone tower?
So if a cell phone's losing contact with the network or a single tower? I can answer both. If it's losing contact with a tower, it could be because it's out of range of that specific tower. If it's losing contact with all towers, an example of that would be if your phone died, if it was placed into airplane mode, if it was destroyed, if it was powered off, or if it was out of range too.
If the end time for one session is 7:05 a.m., why are the ARCs saying 7:13 a.m.?
So those are 2 separate data sets. The end time, 7:05, that was the data session itself. So you're just getting the access on the side of the tower. And the 7:13, 7:14 are associated to the ARC. So those are the network essentially sending signals to the device. Those signals are timed, and based on the timing of those signals, those distances are provided.
Can you tell if the phone was on at a certain time? If so, was it on at 7:47 a.m.?
At 7:47 a.m., there were no records indicating that the phone was on the network anymore.
All right, Mr. McCready, anything else in follow-up to those questions?
So, just to be clear, when is the last time that you are certain that the phone was connected to the network?
At 7:14.
Okay, thank you.
So you referred to 2 towers, if we refer to them as north and south. When you did your analysis, you did not have the device connecting to another tower after the north and south towers that we have in your presentation, correct?
Correct.
And then just one last question, because I want to make sure I'm clear on it. So a data session, if I were to Google when a movie starts, would that be a data session on my phone?
If you're not connected to Wi-Fi, yes.
Okay, so because based on the question that you were asked, you said the data session is different than the device signal when it's connecting to the tower. Could you explain that for us a little bit?
The difference between the data sessions and the tower registration?
Yes.
So the data sessions are going to be usage on the Verizon network that's billable to the customer. And the network performance stuff that has the distance readings from those towers, those are all Verizon generated records.
What are examples of data sessions?
An example of a data session would be if you pull up your phone and are using an app that accesses the internet, if you get an email notification, if you're browsing the web, if you're watching a video on YouTube, things of that nature.
So the last data session ended at roughly 7:05, but then the device continued to connect with the towers until late, soon after that, right? 7:13, I believe?
Correct.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
I'm all set, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay. May Ms. Ziegler be excused from her subpoena?
Yes.
Yes, and may we approach very briefly?
You may. Thank you, ma'am. You are free to go.